welcome all to this evening today session of Stroke Support India, where we're going to talk about aphasia, its diagnosis and treatment. And we have Dr. Thomas with us. We have had him earlier also, and he's been kind to again put forward his efforts today. A short introduction: he was the Associate Dean for Admission and Career Services at the Heller School for Social Policy and Management at Brandeis University for 5 years, and earlier was running a company in staffing and career counseling for about 15 odd years. He suffered an ischemic stroke in 2011. He lost movement in his right arm and right leg and vision in right eye, but was lucky to receive timely treatment, and has been strongly associated with aphasia-related issues and stroke-related issues. Tenure with National Aphasia Association in USA, and presently founder of Aphasia Nation Incorporated, and a publisher of several books on stroke and aphasia, and here with the mission of speaking at different fora about stroke and aphasia as part of his aphasia awareness campaign. So welcome to you, Thomas, and welcome Shruti ji, and welcome all who are here. We hope to have a good evening. Over to you, Shruti. Then you can just pass it on to Dr. Thomas, and I will just go in the background someplace. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Dr. Thomas. Last time you said we will definitely meet once again. So I was waiting for this meeting. I very well remember. I have written down the points, last time, whatever you have guided us. I do it every session. So I was going through it once again. The 5 rules of aphasia recovery, as was discussed last time. Motivation, practice, practice, and practice. So yes, I understand. And definitely we see the results of the practice. It is there. Yes, we are seeing that. And then how you explain how plasticity builds branches in the brain, and how it creates the neuroplasticity. And I had asked you one question, and I will never remember, I will never forget it. I asked how the hand recovery is connected to speech. You told my husband to lift his arm and show you his arm function. So you said that it is not entirely different. So it's all interconnected in the brain. So now it has motivated us to do more, to practice more of hand function also from then on. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, and looking forward to learning a lot from you today. So I'm ready with my book and pen. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's all right, so I'll share, and that takes a second and make sure that it's really working well. Let's see, that should work. Okay, can you still see me here? You can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can see the presentation. We
Okay,
can hear
good.
you as well.
Okay, good. And so I advance to the next slide, make sure that that is working. You see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, well, as Hobi said, it'd take me 20, 30 minutes. I'm sure I always have a longer story to make, but I'll go faster as best I can. This is quite a small world. Since yesterday, I was lucky enough to meet with my friends in Hong Kong, and they are here today with you and your group in India. So this is really a small world, as big as the world might otherwise be. So I really appreciate getting to see my friends in Hong Kong as well as my friends in India. So this is really wonderful. So I really do appreciate that. I'm going to go quickly through here because as the agenda said before, we're going to talk about my experience and then aphasia and then recovery. So I'll move through the my particular story. In my particular case, I was a dean at a college outside of Boston. This is Main Street, what you're seeing there. And my wife and I were walking, and she was ahead of me, so she didn't see me. And the last thing I remember was looking at my shoes in the middle of that street. That's Main Street, and that's the last thing I remember was looking at my shoes. So that's really how it all started. And of course, you see, it was just over 10 years ago since it started. I've been there several times since then and measured it. And my wife dragged me from that pole 310 feet to the pharmacy that you see there, CVS, and to the chairs in the back. Of course, I had no idea. I didn't know until later that the body would still move. So my wife dragged me and pushed and pulled, but my body would still do what she wanted me to do. So that's how she got me to the back. And she threw me into these chairs, and I woke up while she called 911, and there was a crowd gathering, as if they were looking for an accident, not realizing that I was the accident. I too could see them. So I thought that they too were looking for an accident. But by then I had the stroke. I really couldn't understand. But that was the beginning of understanding that I had this thing called aphasia and stroke. But I went back to sleep again, and I didn't wake up till later that day. The stroke was at about 8:30 at night. They got me in the ambulance into the hospital fairly quickly. I was there by 9:30. They did all the assessment to see that I could get this drug called TPA. And they said I was fit enough. But they did look at all the paperwork and saw that I was there at that same hospital 3 months before, when I had open heart surgery, aortic valve replacement, and a quadruple bypass. So that's when they said, oh boy, that was just 3 months ago. This particular drug is very powerful, and it will just dissolve all the clots in your body, including the good ones. So they had to make a decision whether I would get the TPA or not. Thought I was fit enough. I'd just gone back to work a week before, and I ended up getting the drug. That's how my right side and my vision were restored. Again, not that I really knew, but that's how it worked in my case. But I did, when they gave me that drug, I woke up again, as I say, with a vengeance, because I started screaming and beating myself on the left side of my head. I was beating myself in the temple area, the Broca's area, and they had to strap me down because otherwise I would have hurt myself. And my wife was there, so she knew that I woke up, started screaming, beating myself. On the inside, I could remember that. And it was months later when I could express it to my wife. And literally she said, oh, that's what you were doing. We had no idea. You just woke up and started beating yourself and screaming, strapping you down. So it turns out that the drug, being as powerful as it is on the inside, it made a lot of noise, as if it was popcorn popping, but it was on the inside. And that's how I could experience it and retell that story later when I was able to tell people about it. But yeah, that's how TPA works. So all of you who have had TPA, I know my friend in Hong Kong have, maybe later you'll be able to tell me if you remembered it or if you were still unconscious. But I left the hospital after 6 days, had a month before going to a rehab facility, outpatient, and started my therapy. And on the same day, I started a diary. I didn't tell anybody. I just thought it was my habit to keep track of what was happening to me. But I didn't realize, in my case, I couldn't read, write, or speak well. So I really didn't realize that what I was writing didn't make any sense. But I kept on doing it anyway. and I ended up writing what turned out to be a 500-page diary. And that's it. You're looking at it. But it was so interesting. In my case, I was very, very accidental, very lucky that I was saving all of this evidence so that when the day came to become aware of what I was doing, because clearly I was writing badly and I thought it looked fine, that allowed me, once I became better, to then study the evidence of what I've been saving for quite a while. So that is how all of this really, really happened, for those of you who have read some of my work. This is the first entry of my diary. So you get to see it. The words were spelled properly, except for one, the one that looks like calendar. I lined it out and spelled it properly as calendar. Of course, I didn't know that the language still didn't make any sense. You can see it says designed, built, calendar, end, day of design, and so on. It still didn't make whatever it was I was trying to say. But that too is the beginning of saving the evidence so that later, as I became more aware, then I could better understand what I was doing. Of course, at the time, I thought that looked fine, because every day I would write and then look back at all my previous entries, and they all look fine to me. I could not tell that they were, quote, wrong. And you'll find out, or you'll hear me talk about it, that the fact that I was writing itself is therapeutic. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter that you're telling them, oh, Tom, you're writing it badly, do it better. No, that means nothing. There's really not a whole lot to do with the language itself at that time. It is the activity itself. It's the activity that provides the stimulus. And as a result of providing the stimulus, then the brain takes over, and the brain is quite accidental in that way, because it's built that way, because it can, quote, see what's right, and it can see what's wrong because it knows the rules, because you've built those rules over your life. In my case, I was 59 when I had my stroke. That's 59 years of building that network and building the rules, the syntax, the grammar of language in all different languages. And once that's been built, it's there. Obviously, it's been damaged, but it has a lot more of the iceberg than you would think, that are all still below the waterline. So that's how that first one went, the first entry. I also was writing. I was an engineer for 20 years, and I started writing using what you're looking at there, graphs and charts and metaphorical drawings that do make a lot of sense. And that too is very interesting, because when I was writing in my diary, the text didn't make any sense. The words, the giraffes, the images do make a lot of sense. In both cases, I thought, this is just great that I'm saving all this information, keeping track of my life after my stroke, not yet realizing that some of this were words that I had no idea of. But you get to see a bunch of them, and I did provide one, so you get to see it better, because here it's too many. But I got you this one. Because when I wrote this, by then I realized that my loss of my language did not have a lot to do with the words themselves, because I could see, and I couldn't express, but I could see individual words. But when you put them together, then I couldn't understand what they meant. But as I was, and you'll see in another slide about some signs out on the street, but in this case, when I realized all that, I wrote down what are railroad boxcars, but I drew in these arrows indicating that the coupling was gone. There was no coupling there. So there were individual words that I could read, but when you tried to put them together and say, okay, Tom, what does this say? I would go, I don't know what that is. It didn't have much to do with the words. It has to do with the coupling. And of course, that is the case, because individual cells, meaning neurons, they they are relatively ignorant, although they have a lot of power on their own. But you need to couple, as it were, and become networks for all these cells. And because of the way the brain works, they become more ingrained into them, into those networks. And then those networks know who they are. So they become more conscious of what they are, what they can do. And that is where the damage occurs, is in those networks that can no longer do what it used to do, but it still has a tremendous amount of the material that has been built into habits, basically into these networks. So we have to just grow more of the same coupling material, which is really brain matter, dendrites and synapses, otherwise called branches and leaves, metaphorically, of photosynthesis, which all of us know about photosynthesis. It converts light into green leaves. Plasticity converts thought and cognitive activities into brain matter, branches and leaves, otherwise dendrites and synapses. And that is what you have to do to regrow those particular appendages to become the network they need to be, or at least above the critical mass of that network that now can express what you could not express before. When I started walking on the street, which I had to do because of my heart surgery, that is when I started to see all these signs on the street. And I began to say to myself, because I mentioned that, again, I was an engineer and I built ships for the Navy, and I was the director of mechanical engineering and design at that shipyard. And late in life, I also wanted a research PhD, which I got at the Heller School at Brandeis University when I was 54. So you start to put that together, because I was still looking for how this big research question would be. I didn't realize that I was still waiting to have that stroke and aphasia. And that was, as it turns out now, I had the skills that I yet didn't know how to attack. And now I understand that attacking aphasia and how that happens with all of us turns out to be the last tool I needed. So you put all that together. As I walked in that street, I began to see that the individual words like stop sign, and that stop sign is right there in Waltham, and I could see that. I was actually pretty excited that I could see that word. Road work ahead, I could read that and say, okay, I understand what that means, right? So that means there's some amount of that coupling still there. But then I got to other signs and I couldn't read them. And that's how I started taking pictures of them, because I would actually take pictures of them and bring them home to my wife. And I would use the same phone that we all have, and I would take pictures, bring it to my wife and say, tell me what that means. And she would say, this land that unites, and other things, but that was too long, quote, long. And they weren't connected anymore. So that is when I started asking my wife, and she would say, here's what it says. And I don't know why that is the case, that I can't see, in this case, very simple words. And that's when I figured out, oh, it doesn't have much to do with the words. It has to do with this other neurological coupling that is or isn't available to you. And that is what you have to grow. And for most of us with stroke and aphasia, we probably have lost a couple thousand miles of myelinated fiber. Thousands of miles in your head that were lost. That means you have an awful lot more. They have to grow them back, and that takes time. That's why people do ask me all the time, Tom, how come I just can't get it faster? Well, you can try to read faster if you're healthy, but you can't read faster enough to then at the same time somehow make more fibers faster. No, it doesn't work like that. That is why people ask, yes, it does take time. But if you're at 6 months, wait for 6 more months. If you're there for a year, getting better, wait for another 2 years to then we can talk about that, and then you get to see how it works on the inside. It takes time, but in my case, 3-4 years, several years ago now, I was reasonably able to communicate well in reading, writing, and speaking. I mentioned that I was walking in the street, taking pictures, keeping my diary. Then I started recording myself with the same phone. And that too provided me with more information that I would excavate later once I became more aware, because I would record all the time. Turned out to be 202 recordings. And then I'd play them back all the time so I could hear them. And they all sounded fine to me. I couldn't tell there was a difference or a problem. So it took me several years, I mean like 4 or 5 years before I had all of those tapes transcribed. And then I also found out, not unlike my diary, then I could see what it was that I was making problems with based on what I was listening to later, because I couldn't listen to it then. But I could now see what I was speaking and could understand it. So hopefully this is going to work. You get to hear me talking and you get to see the exact date of when it happened. So hopefully this works.
In such a way that the combination of both necessarily produce a maturely compatibly of units thought characteristic by nature is made precisely by this process of salimentation. And what happens is neither a sign formation of thoughts into matter, nor a foundation of signs into ideas.
I didn't give you another slide that it lets you see what the words were in that book. Too many extra slides, but you get to see what I was trying to say. And of course, some of those longer words I really had a hard time with. I talked about plasticity and how the brain works. This is a video, as it says here, of neurons making connections to other neurons and growing. It's not like they're just reaching out and grabbing. They are. You can see that their arm is extending, is building an arm that goes further so that they can grab another neuron and start to bind itself together. So this is what thoughts looks like. And we will play, this is very short, so we'll play it twice. You get to watch what otherwise you see it looks just like a cell, right? With appendages, and then you see them start to grow towards each other. That's what thought looks like. That is plasticity. And hopefully this works too. I'm going to do it again so you can keep an eye on one dendrite or another that's growing out to the other one, so you can see it again and see where it's coming from. All different places, and you can see it leaving the screen and coming back, obviously much longer, again, trying to connect. That's how the brain works. That really is the converting thought into brain matter. So now when it comes to therapy for all of us, and why Hardeep, we talked earlier about helping people even online in terms of how it is we get better therapeutically. It turns out that an awful lot of how we get better and the therapeutic understanding of that has to do with the activities themselves, and they help build what I talked about, because it's what I did without knowing it at the time, building this therapeutic structure that is needed. So if the therapist were to tell you, and most typically don't, here, Tom, start a diary, record yourself, walk around the world, take pictures of the world around you, and build this structure. And it has to be therapeutic structure, because after whatever you get with your formal therapy, it's going to end. And in my case, I had good insurance. I had 30 sessions spread across 4 months, but that they were still 30 sessions, 15 minutes, 35 minutes each. So it became 15 hours of therapy spread across 4 months. What are you doing for the rest of your life between the 1 hour a week of therapy? What are the other 39 hours of the week, of the work week? What should you be doing? It turns out that if you build this structure, then the only thing that leaves after the structure has been built and after formal therapy has ended, the only thing now has left is the individual therapy themselves. Now you have the structure with which you can continue to do and become therapeutic on your own. So that too is highly important, so that people like you and me, I'll say if we built this structure, but you and I are now talking about building that structure. And I would like to say that at that point, you don't really need the therapist. What you need is the structure that allows the therapeutic energy to make its way into your brain the way I have shown you here. And all of that was built by me without my knowing that, which is also very important. I did not know. It was my habit before. And yes, I was lucky that I had these successful habits before, but I bet you that most of the people in the room, meaning in this room, also have the habits that you have built you who you were before your stroke. So it turns out that an awful lot of your success after your stroke has to do with who you were before the stroke, becoming more aware of that, and as a result, becoming more purposeful about those habits that you had leaned on before without realizing how important those habits were to be able to lean on. So it turns out to be very, very important to understand. All of my friends, many of my friends understand these rules of aphasia recovery because it too is so important. The first, of course, is motivation. If you were motivated in your life before, and you were, then the same motive force, the headwaters of motivation, came before the stroke, not after. Yes, sometimes after, if you've never been motivated before and now you have a stroke and somehow become more motivated, that can help, and that can help too. But if you were an unmotivated person before your stroke, it's going to make it more difficult to become the motivated person you need to be. But if you become more aware of who you were before and realize that who you were before is so highly therapeutic, if you come to understand that and lean on it, that is where motivation comes from. Number one. Number two, practice. The 10 principles of neuroplasticity. Everybody should have a copy of those articles and read it over and over and over again. Because practice, repetition is one of those rules. And a lot of people say, oh, you mean I should just say these words over and over and over again? Not really, not the way the brain works. When you first learned your language as a child, as a baby, there was no rules. You built the rules based on the experience, you the baby, when we were all babies, you built those rules based on just experiencing those rules through what they could hear, what we could hear from our elders and from books and other things once we were able to do that. That's what practice is. Practice, practice, practice. So the third rule, practice. Fourth, practice. 5, more practice. That is how it works. The good news is that if you did all of this before your stroke, if you if you were an older person, you want to get a research PhD when you're in your 50s, you have to be motivated, you have to do a lot of practice, right? Because you still had your job to do and your family and everything else. All of you have done all kinds of things before your stroke to do whatever's next for that next big step in life. The same thing happens after the stroke. You just need the motivation and practice component that turns out to be highly therapeutic as part of the principles of neuroplasticity. That's the way the brain works. Once we become aware about how the brain works, and most of us don't know about it. I've told you before, I'm just an engineer. I was just a lug up here. I didn't really think about how, if I came to understand what was in there, that I would definitely learn so much more, because it'd be more purposeful about the foundation for all of that. Amazing, really. So that is the experience itself, how it was that I get better, and now what I do going forward. And basically now realizing that, as they say, boy, you need to do something with your life. I didn't know what that would be until after that, and after that, and after that. But every single day, this is when I figured out that this is what I do. Just because of the happenstance of what I had lived through, as all of us do in our own way. So Aphasia Nation without borders, meaning around the world, we're lucky that we have Zoom, as it were, the technology that lets all of us around the world begin to learn more than we otherwise would not have learned about if we were just really, I don't want to say tracked, but I'll say trapped into our neighborhood, our town, don't have the technology, don't know what this thing about aphasia is, never mind the plasticity, which is the foundation of all learning. So once we come to understand that, then we all have to make other steps to say, okay, what should I do with this particular gift, which is helping people understand how the brain works, and why that would be so important for our other people, young people who also still don't know what the brain would be. So this is what it says here. The Aphasia Nation is led by us, people with aphasia, typically. In Aphasia Nation, we do have some SLPs, but they already come with a passion for doing what it is you and I do. But even the board of this board, when it's finally constructed, will be mostly run by people with aphasia. We have to build it like a movement, because this goes on forever. It's not unlike the way the brain works and how recovery happens. You don't get to a place and then say, oh, okay, I'm finally here, and go on and do something else. No, all that doing something else is all about the movement itself, forever, about stroke, aphasia, plasticity, and learning. And then I do believe that the people with aphasia are the teachers who can now help people understand, because teaching is sort of the uber reach for people with aphasia to now start teaching based on the experience that all of us had to get to that point in time. So to be able to teach means you have been working awfully hard to improve your language from a stroke, bringing you to that next step of being able to teach others who otherwise don't have the ability at that point in time to learn more about everything about plasticity. So teaching the healthcare community is very important, the wider public, very important, as well as educators. For those who do all the teaching, it stands to reason that all those teachers need to know one more step in how we teach, and that is understanding how we learn. And we learn through plasticity, which is the foundation for all learning. So that is something I say that people with aphasia happen to provide the keyhole to understanding how the brain works, even more than either you're a scientist, that's one thing, but we have experienced it all, gone through that. And yes, we're all on a trajectory of getting better, some better, some worse, but doesn't really matter. It's the fact that we are in that room, meaning this particular room, and are dedicated to understanding more about how it is we get better, and then sharing what we have with others as they too are coming up, as one of my friends says, the newbies who are at the very beginning and still don't yet understand how this brain really does work. And for those who have read this particular poet, that's the job here of Aphasia Nation. If you're going to live a legacy, make a mark on the world that cannot be erased. And that's what I do, and that's what Aphasia Nation does. And that's it. I'll stop sharing, and we can have our conversation. I hope everybody really heard this the last half an hour. You did hear all this, right?
Oh, we were around, sure. No, it was a very nice presentation and wonderfully put, of course, particularly at the end. You know, what you say, leave a mark. I think, you know, somewhere we all seek purpose. I think whether stroke affected or not, we do seek purpose at some time. And to that extent, when an adversity is turned into a purpose, is all the more, you know, makes many things worthwhile. Absolutely, you put it so well. I will just maybe come in later, but I would just leave it to others. I have some questions. I will come back to that later. Anyone, you can unmute yourself, and Shruti ji is there, and we can take it further from there. Shruti?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. It was really wonderful. A lot of information and many things to write for me. I know it's available. It's available on the Stroke Support India website. But if I have it in my book, I look into it often. So it helps me to recap the session and make my brain more plastic so that I can help my husband.
Yes, you're right. Yes,
That's
everybody
right.
has to be plastic, whether you have a stroke or not.
Yes. So I have a few questions. In particularly in other countries where we have a mother tongue or a regional language, and our working language will be English. In case of my husband, he speaks his mother tongue in sentences, and English, he says the target word. We are able to catch him. We are able to understand him. I read a particular article that if we work with multiple languages, the brain is more plastic. There is more improvement in aphasia. But some suggestions I've heard is work on one language. Let that person be comfortable in one language. At least let them be able to communicate in one language. So what do you think about it?
So I got most of what you said. Ask the question again, shorter. Tell me again, is it?
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Same thing last time. Okay. How do you think about working with multiple languages or working with a single language? Which is better to progress in aphasia?
It's always a good question. And there are some experts, of course, around the world about people who had stroke aphasia, and they had, prior to their stroke, they had 5, 6, 7 languages themselves. And then as they got better, then they can now express to others who know many different languages, that they can express it back to us and say, oh, in my case, and then they tell you, I was born with this, and then I acquired these later, or I was born with several languages at birth, at the crib, and then I got more and then had a stroke. So they can begin to tell you, I'm holding it up, then they can tell you, okay, so this is what happened. This one does better, or this one does better. They can then tell you. In terms of using one versus another, I'm not exactly sure one versus another, as opposed to the one that was acquired earliest, basically your mother tongue. Often it's the mother tongue that has been damaged, but it's also the one that is most able to reacquire for all those good reasons. Now, having said that, this particular expert in Britain, he had acquired one young, but for like 50 years, he lived and worked off of this one, a new language, right? To him, obviously, this language he knows very, very well. And after his stroke, sure enough, he was dealing with this language. His mother tongue was still damaged and he really couldn't get to it. Why? As you said, not so much plasticity that was directed at that earlier language not having been, quote, used for 50 years. So I like the way they all talk about it, because basically it still depends on who you are before your stroke, how you use that language on a day-to-day basis versus who your mother tongue was. If that even begins to come close to what your answer to your question would sound like.
Yes.
Although, and I'm going to make a note. I try to send articles. I sent one to Shahar earlier about one article, and I'll send another one to Hardeep about this particular person with stroke and aphasia in India. I'm sorry, in England, who is now able to express. You know, and he was a scientist, believe it or not, with multi-languages. So I'll send that article to Hardeep, and then you can spread that around too.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, we're going to talk, and maybe I'll draw him in to be part of Aphasia Nation. So he's very, very nice fellow and very funny person. Yeah.
Yep, that would be great. See, thinking a little bit about what Shruti has been talking about, to my mind, as you said, if I'm practicing different things, which could be, for example, even learning the keyboard, for example, or learning another language, having a mother tongue, and a stroke happens, the inherent tendencies of doing something new or doing something are there, and that should stand one in good stead, rather than someone who has not been exposed to different languages or different skill development. And what one should focus on, whether one should focus on one's mother tongue or, let's say, English, for example, I think it will be a natural progression, perhaps. So one is comfortable with one word, maybe one will have the ability to think of the corresponding English word, perhaps. What you are stronger in will come first to you. I would imagine that, because those pathways are there. I kind of put them to kind of grooves in the brain. Those grooves which are stronger, the thoughts or what the currents perhaps will tend to go through them first, rather than going through the grooves which are perhaps not yet made or are not as strong as the other ones. So one would perhaps initially be focusing on what comes more naturally. It could be a mix, your mother tongue or as well as an English. Whatever word comes first to your mind, one would tend to. And as time progresses, perhaps one will be deliberately thinking again and again. It's a question of developing plasticity, as you say. Suppose I speak a word in Punjabi. Punjabi is my mother tongue. But I go back and I think of the corresponding English word, then repeat it in English. And I keep on doing it again and again and again. Then the English word comes almost as naturally as my mother tongue. So I think it will be a question of, as we repeatedly say here, practicing. Yes, Shruti, you were saying something?
Yes, the same thing you said right now. We do it. When we say a word in English, as a part of our speech therapy, which we do it every day, we say the corresponding word in mother tongue. If he is able to say the word in mother tongue, we try to say it in English. So right now he is able to match it almost accurately.
See, as just as a humorous aside, in fact, only yesterday, there was something going on, and as a context, I just, searched a little bit. In some cases, profanities, they come out the first when one is, on the journey, because one is, and there's an article, there's some research on that, I imagine, because one is, whatever is easiest comes out first, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There is some study done on that, as to, and then of course one goes back and one tries to control and come back with the more appropriate words. But as you said, firstly, let's get the grooves more deep. Can go back. Other thing that I was interested in, hearing from you. You talked about 10 principles of neuroplasticity. Is there an article on that or someplace?
You mean the principles of neuroplasticity?
Principles of neuroplasticity, yes.
Yes, that's the one I mentioned sending to my friend in Hong Kong.
Yeah, okay. If you could share with us also, I
would do that.
Someplace. Yes, we will do that.
Yeah, that is also the Bible. It's not really, but it's just a really good, relatively short article, scientific article about the principles.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I just found it on Google as well.
Yeah, okay. So
that's true. And it is online too. Yeah.
Anyone else would like to come in with some things? You can unmute or put in the chat, please. I'm seeing Anuragji. Yes, Anuragji. Please.
And thanks, Thomas. That was a great presentation. So I have 3 questions primarily. First one is how Aphasia Nation can get involved with the stroke support group in this community in India in supporting or interacting with the aphasia affected people. Second one is if somebody is in your case, I think writing diary helps a lot. If somebody is not able to use his writing hand, what could be the other option? The third question is what is the first step? What is the first most victory? Like, were you able to tell your name itself? In my case, for my mother, she is still struggling with telling her own name or our near and dear ones' names. So how to reach that milestone of telling the basic names first? So 3 questions primarily. Thomas?
Oh, I was watching Hardeep to see if he was the one responding first.
No. Well, just to paraphrase what Anuragji said, first was how could Aphasia Nation and stroke support work together? And yes, it would be wonderful. Certainly, any way that we can. And of course, you are there. You are helping us all the time, and we look forward to that. And just before the meeting started, if you remember, Thomas, we were discussing that if you are aware of aphasia meets happening, that we can be party to. So that was one. And the second was what Anurag mentioned was, and that was something that I wanted also to come to, that in some cases, the hand is not functional. So the person is not able to keep a diary, at least in the initial stages. What could be the alternatives? Maybe we can be creative as a group. I have some thoughts, maybe I can put it, but we can also think about that. And the third point that he mentioned was in the event that even the basics such as, let's say, name of your son or your mother is as of now not happening, how long or what should one be doing? And Anuragji, just to add to that, if you can just provide some context. I think your mother is now, when did she suffer a stroke and what happened at that time?
So it was about 1 year back. It is more than a year now. And she again had a stroke 6 months, smaller one 6 months back also. So 2 strokes in the last 1 year. Though she is recovering, she is able to walk with support now and speaking also. But she get depressed when she is not able to tell the names of the near and dear ones, her own name.
Her own name. Mhm.
But does she know the name?
Yeah, she knows the name. Primarily she tell different name, not the right name.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thanks for all those questions. So I'll do a couple of them and then we'll keep adding to it, I'm sure. With Aphasia Nation, I think what is going to happen, given our big, small world, that people with aphasia become the teachers for the teachers. So we have to teach the teachers. So it just so happens in my case, after all these years and having saved a lot, not all at all, the scientific language, we have to teach people about it. And part of that, of course, is these presentations and then also the articles. So I think the Aphasia Nation, as we filter our way into that world, that various people, like all of us here, are part of a class. If I happen to be the teacher on this particular moment in time, but then somebody else starts talking and they become the teacher, and then others and others. But now each of us then find other people in our neighborhood who, you know, have finally got to, through Hardeep, more information based on, I can't pronounce your name, but Aruga. Now you're the teacher, then helping teach others in your neighborhood. So I think that's the model for Aphasia Nation. And since Aphasia Nation isn't even formally announced yet, another month or two, for me, I think, and then for all of us, it's going to take us years to grow this into an international nonprofit. But I think it's very helpful because there aren't any others other than therapists who will talk about with other therapists about how then somehow they can help us understand it. I think it's up to us to figure this out, be able to express, and then realizing that part of that expression of teaching is another way to further develop the plasticity in your brain, basically growing more dendrites for all of us, never mind whether you had stroke or not. So I think that's important for number one. Number two, the non-dominant hand. I have to do an exercise. We won't do it here today, but some other time. I have an exercise for people with stroke with their dominant hand having a stroke, and then having to use the non-dominant or of course the dominant hand who's now, you want to make that get better. I have another exercise for that too. Both are sort of very interesting, but the dominant hand that you want to make that better now that you had the stroke, one of the things, of course, is practice. And there is this thing called finger platter. If you have seen that before, if you haven't, you can go online on Amazon, finger platter. So that's one thing. And then the other exercise, then you get to see, and I won't even tell you. It's very interesting, very funny. And all these people go, oh, when it comes to trying to use a non-dominant hand for the rest of your life, especially at the very beginning, this is the exercise as people go, oh, why does it hurt me so badly? Why am I so tired with this hand? But it's an exercise that you would find very funny. And then Oh, about your mom still having trouble, if I understand it, your mom still can't say her own name, but she knows who she is. Mm.
Many times, sometimes she is able to tell, but many times
No.
she cannot tell.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I always refer to curves of recovery. I call them curves of recovery. So you have we'll talk about the one curve of recovery, and that is for an acquired brain injury, which is aphasia, stroke and aphasia. That's one kind of a curve, and it depends on what we talked about before, you know, the motivation, the practice, everything that goes into creating new brain matter. But then there's another curve, and this is another curve. And if this one's going up, then another curve is as we get older, you know, this curve is going down. Not terribly down, but down as we get, all of us, as we grow up, we lose stuff every day, right? I mean, you know, you lose your hair. Some of us more than others. You lose your hair, same thing on the inside, you're losing dendrites. Natural progression. And now you add two curves together, then you have a different combination of how those two are affecting each other. And then of course, another curve, if you have other brain diseases that are also somewhat natural, but they, as we get older, they can become more obviously dire. You put all those together and then say, oh, I don't know, but maybe some of that makes it more or less able to access other items, including even a word of which you're very well aware of, but for some reason can't quote get to that. Then there could be, you know, having to unfold some of these curves and find out where some of them might otherwise be bothering you more than we otherwise would know as we get older. So anyway, that's just one idea, but I can understand, I really can, the way the brain works. Half the time, I know I can't understand it until just thinking about it. But yes, but good for her that she can say it.
If I can come in, Tom, I was just a thought. Anuragji, maybe you could try it and see what happens. Make a poster on which you write the names of, let's say, son's bete ka naam, mother's name, father's name, and hang it on a wall in front. And she can read. Right, Anuragji?
Right, she can.
पढ़ तो सकती है ना?
Yeah, now she has started reading.
So make a, because it may not necessarily be a speech issue. It could also be an issue of memory, you know, cognition issue. So just put a poster for some days, you know, of the name of, you know, your name of son, name of, you know, the relatives around, and see if that makes a difference. I think it should make a difference, क्योंकि at least जब सामने होगा तो कुछ बोला भी जाएगा. I don't know, just a thought जो मेरे दिमाग में आया. You could try that and see, you know, where it leads.
Yeah,
you could try that. Or other thought, and this was something that I want to maybe have others also. Anyone here is keeping a diary?
Yeah.
Besides, of course,
I have started doing this I think start from this month, actually, the month of 1st of February is when I started writing.
Earlier, we used to just write about one of the instances, like we went for our first trek after the stroke. So it was a very long trek, and like it was a test of his, physical stamina as well. Then he wrote about it. Then we celebrated his birthday. Then he wrote about it. Like earlier, it was just one of the instances he was writing, and for the past 1 month, he has been writing regularly about every day. Though it was the same thing, like what I had for lunch breakfast, I met somebody. I saw something unique, so he records everything.
Yeah.
He started off with 1 page, then it became 1.5 page, and now he is almost writing like 2 pages every day.
Even though I is not the best of reading for in a way, because some of the words are not the best, but I'm at least trying to write, okay, and in my own, yeah. So
I think it can be a very good habit because, as Tom also mentioned, one, it helps in many manners, including a motivational tool, because of there can be days when you can go back and you can say, okay, I am much better than what I was, 1 month ago, 1.5 months ago. So it will help in that direction also. And every little effort adds up, you're remembering words, you're writing words, all those.
I agree. And the tense that I use, the first time on, I probably be making mistakes. Then what I do is I go through it once again and see, did I make any mistake? Then I try to correct them. Then what I do is then I go back to my wife and say, please go through this and see this correct or wrong. And then she also makes some correct. So in that way, I like to make sure that what I'm reading is, if I have to see to somebody else, then they should say, yeah, I have used the right one or the wrong word, kind of a thing. Yeah.
So certainly it helps. Even my mother kept a diary, which actually I wasn't aware. I found it later, but she would write about, perhaps someone advised her at that time, and she was basically a Hindi teacher, so she would write in Hindi. आज मैंने गिलहरी को देखा, वो खिड़की पर थी, and even small things, and kind of brings a focus, kind of maybe brings a discipline. So, and I think it's a good habit. Although frankly, I don't have it, to be very frank with you. I myself. But I think it's a very good habit to cultivate, and anyone who can do that, I think it will be very, very useful. And if anyone is doing that, please, come in, or maybe that's a takeaway from here.
I also wanted to add to Anuragji that Anuragji, when he had a stroke, it was on September 2nd. On that day, when they called out to his name, even he was not able to recognize his name. He remembered my name though. Mine was the only name he remembered. I don't know how, but he remembered his. He was wanting. The name was there in his head, but he could not say it. When they were asking him, do you know who this is? Do you know Mr. Sridhar? Yes, he used to say, but he will not know. What is your name? I know. That was the only word he could say. And he was hospitalized for 1 week. And in that whole of that week, of course, he couldn't write at that time. And my daughter shared Dr. Tom's video immediately after, I think, 2-3 days after he was admitted. So I had listened to his and how he had made it. So I started writing, like, what was his progression, what was his vocabulary, what was he using. He was always saying, I don't know what's happening, I don't know. On the 4th day, he started saying, hey, something I am doing. On the 4th day, he said that, kuch samajh mein aa raha hai. And also the language, I wanted to add, like, I was sharing with Dr. Tom yesterday. At that time, also by God's grace, he was using all 3 languages, Hindi, Tamil, and English. All 3 languages, he was able to, whatever he could say, he was able to understand all 3 languages. And as soon as he came home, after coming home only, he could say his name. My name is Sridhar. After he came home, he settled down in our own house. Then it was Ganesh Chaturthi. He came home on the Ganesh Chaturthi day. So I remember, and it was very emotional for me.
And I should be honest, some of the friends used to come and see me. Some of I know them by face, but I can't tell their names. So, but it took some time to understand who they are, kind of thing. Like I told them very clearly, see, I know who you are. You worked with me, but if you ask my name, I don't know the name. It took some time, almost about 2 or 3 weeks for them to know the name. And some of them later that too also. So, but it is slowly getting better. Okay, I think for me more important is to understand. Okay, more importantly, write and read. Importantly, okay, while I can speak, it can definitely get better. That's what that's for sure. Okay, and I think for me the right hand, especially while I'm using the laptop, it takes time. I used to, earlier I used to use all the fingers. Now I can use only one of them after the stroke. Okay, I think that has got to get better because of physiotherapy and speech therapy, I would say. Yeah.
So it took him 1 week to remember his name, and every day we used to practice. What is your name? Where do you live? What is our daughter's name? Every day we practice. Then he came to know. But yeah, there are other factors also, like your mother, the age factor also is there. So yeah, I think family tree is a good idea. I like that idea of making a poster with the family tree, mother, father, सबके pictures लगा दो तो maybe more, you know, with the picture, the name, and you know, it could be like a thing she could see. That's a good idea.
Yeah. I think some network issue.
Others, please come in. Please share your experiences. So, how is your journey in this aphasia recovery? What are the steps you're taking, and how many hours of practice in a week, or how many hours of the speech therapist? How are they helping you? Whether it's online or whether you are able to meet personally, I want everyone to share their experiences. It will help everyone else in the group.
See, for me, I can go to the speech therapist place in Hong Kong, even though there is COVID out there, but I'm able to go there. So it's almost 1 hour's 1 hour's session every week. What I've also started doing is that I'm also having a speech therapy session with somebody in India, and that is through Zoom, not Zoom, through WhatsApp. So my physiotherapy is also having every week. So I go to this particular place in Hong Kong where I go to get that done. So that's also for about an hour to an hour and a half. Yes, that's how it is for me.
We will connect offline also, probably, to get more understanding and knowledge from you.
Yes, for sure. And as we keep on emphasizing here, and as Tom also mentioned, physiotherapy or the speech therapy, one day will end, or will lessen. So I think maybe 1 hour with the therapist, but maybe pretty much as you can, even without the therapist. And one can we do keep on discussing at our group also. For example, Sridhar, you mentioned hand movements or right hand or finger movements. So these are the issues that we do talk quite frequently on our web, in our groups, and there have been great recoveries, but at the same time they have taken. I remember, I think it is Jennifer. She's on our group, and I remember approximately she was doing some exercise, maybe some thousands of times a day.
Oh wow!
Something with her hand or something like that. She did share in one of the chats that we were having. She is, pretty much like you, that she could not work on the laptop, for example. She is working now. I see Dharamkar has made a chat comment. Dharamkar, if you can unmute yourself, maybe introduce yourself also, because we haven't interacted earlier.
Hello, sir. Am I
Yes, you're
audible?
Yeah.
I have a question to Dr. Thomas. Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Sir, like when we start with the speech therapy, can we emphasize or prioritize what activities to be started first? I assume names can be a little difficult, like even sometimes names, even our own name can have little complex consonants, letters, which may be a little difficult to pronounce. and saying one's own name makes more emotional. Saying makes it easier. I mean, when you say it, you're confident. When you don't say, when you're not able to say it, it makes more emotional. And one more question I have is, do we wait for all the sounds to be picked up and then go for the words, or how do we go ahead with that?
Tom?
So, yeah,
Hmm?
yeah. Kardeep, go ahead. You were going to give a synopsis of that.
I will just rephrase that. The first,
Like we have, we have a lot of speech sounds, no, sir, like different sounds. Not, and do we wait for all the sounds to be achieved and then start with the words, or do we prioritize what to be learned first, then move ahead with the therapy? Because again, therapy is an ongoing process. Your understanding, and what is your understanding about this?
Sure. This and the you had two questions. I know you just reiterated number two about sound, and then we'll come back to number one. In terms of the priority of things, another thing to consider, and is what the therapists refer to, what the scientists refer to, is the stimulus. Everything is about the stimulus for the brain. Everything, whether it is reading, writing, or speaking, stimulus. And to the degree that more stimulus of all kinds of different things, all right, when I say that, I start thinking, oh, okay, I needed to send another article on stimulus. The more stimulus, more plasticity, less stimulus, less plasticity. And I guess I would say I'm not so sure about the prioritization, meaning to prioritize one kind versus another, as opposed to just providing life as you know it, reading, writing, and speaking, whatever's happening around you. And it's from that we draw in that stimulus. In terms of the things that you otherwise want to now express, to be able to say what you can't say, it only comes in here or by reading it, and then it's integrated, obviously integrated, and then building more dendrites and synapses, and eventually it has created the critical mass that allows you then to pull out, be able to now express what you couldn't express before. So it all has to do with the stimulus. I'll sort of stop. I'll stop there because, and then I start babbling. What was the number one again? Number one question.
Prioritizing, so prioritizing the activities.
Oh, that was number one, prioritizing.
Okay. The other one was, suppose, let's say I'm able to say only 5 sounds. I'm able to say the sound pa, I'm able to say the sound ma and na. So I'm able to say words only with this combinations. The rest of the words I'm not able to say. So how do I go about, do I explore the other words, other sounds, or do I pick up the other sounds? Then do I wait for the other sounds to be achieved, then go for the rest of the words? I'm a little confused about this. Can you help me out with that, sir?
Again, for me, just being like I always say, I'm just a person with aphasia. I think that, and then studying as best I can, the weighting and these other things that are more emotionally driven, I should do this versus this, or I should wait for this versus this. I would say, I would end up saying, no, you should just do what you do. One very interesting thing, another article, I didn't know that before you can do anything, meaning express anything, meaning when you are a baby at birth, the brain builds another place in your head, another different place in your head, where it actually saves the baseline for all sounds said. That's the baseline. I didn't know this. It's built here. I'm pointing it up here at the top, not in the left area. Because this isn't any way to express the ma, va, ba. It saves the baseline audio understanding of what the original baseline is. And it's from there that we then start to build the language. So this is here, and it just saves it. It just, you can't express it from here. It just saves all that information. And then that's the baseline. And then they build from that to become whatever you want to then end up saying, which I thought that was very interesting. Because whenever we're about to say any ma, we don't really start with the MA. We start with this sound up here and then be able to pull in all the other additional factors that allow you to say ma or mama or dad or whatever it might be. So I wouldn't say you would be waiting or making decisions. You know, we hardly have a way to decide on anything when it comes to us making this talk, this conversation. You just have to do what comes naturally and go from there. And again, obviously putting yourself in an environment when there is more of the stimulus that you need. So if you live alone and you don't have anybody to talk to, that's the environment you need to be moved into, because that's where the stimulus occurs. So the fact that you should be here with all of your group as much as you can, because that puts you in that environment. And from that, you draw out the information by listening to other people, by hearing you talk about it too, by having different people's intonation. All of that goes into the brain. That's where integration starts. And out of integration comes the additional brain matter, and now able to express what it couldn't express yesterday and what you have yet to express, but will tomorrow after you bring in more stimulus.
I would just add to that. See, I would tend to agree, although I'm not a specialist myself, but I would also tend to agree with what you just said, Tom. Waiting, to my mind, it does not serve a purpose.
Right.
Do what you can at the moment. Maybe one vowel sound is not coming. So, okay, if do without it, but at least practice doing the other vowels or doing the other words. Maybe find an alternate word, that is, and yes, maybe somewhere make a small note that I need to practice this particular sound a little bit more. Don't wait for it to come. It will come when it will. Keep on practicing the other skill sets, because all of that, even thinking, as Thomas mentions, even thinking is helping the brain regenerate itself. So, to my mind, and of course, discuss with your SLP also, but I would think they would also agree that don't wait, at least do what you can, that is what I would say.
I agree. And I think another thing, Hardeep, what you're talking about is we haven't used the word feedback yet. That's another key word, feedback.
Feedback, yes.
Because unfortunately, a lot of people have to come to realize, so two things happen. When you're with a therapist, they will record, they'll be writing things down about what they think you have said or couldn't say, right? And then sometimes you'll get a report, just a piece of paper, but a report the next week, a week after, and that provides the feedback. So you can say, oh, he was saying this, he couldn't do that, so he got 60 out of 100 or 70 out of 100. That's the kind of feedback that you can usually, unfortunately, get from a therapist. The real feedback comes from in the moment, not waiting quote, waiting for a week or two to get this report that says, oh, you did this well, you didn't do this well enough. That's all one kind of feedback. What needs to happen is feedback in the moment. So that means, number one, becoming aware. Oh, the friend here who asked that question, the feedback is having this conversation now, so that Harjeep and others have now said other things that, and then when you said it again the second time, you were more able to describe what that is. Well, this is all the feedback that comes, and it comes in the moment, because the brain hears. You don't decide what to do with that information. It actually comes in and it starts doing what it does. Again, you have to be in that environment. You have to have that stimulus. You have to have it regular and persistent. And by doing that repetitively, then the brain, the machinery is working, and it works faster or slower depending on the stimulus and the feedback, which provides an additional reverberation stimulus. So if you hear it once, good. You hear it again from others who say, oh, I didn't mean this, I meant this. Well, that all goes in. Every single thing, this, even if we just make a peep, that goes in, because you're going to say, oh, then it goes in, becomes part of that stimulus stream. You have to have that happening regularly. It goes in, starts the integration, which takes, it doesn't happen automatically. It's not like it goes in and immediately comes out. It goes in, brings all this information, integrates that, and it might be overnight at least through sleep, because that is another component of how we get better with sleep-dependent plasticity. And in the morning, why? Because now it's been 12 hours and you have built up a tremendous amount of brain matter just from sleeping based on the integration, because integration is important, feedback is important, and now able to express better what you couldn't do yesterday. But again, there's still a tomorrow waiting for today's stimulus going forward.
Yeah, sure. I will just take one question from Anandiji, then we will close the meeting. We are well past 8. He has put in the chat, essentially, her husband had a stroke in March 2020, when he was able to speak well, though with it till time. But in December 21, he had a fall with internal bleeding, and which led to some seizures, etc. also. Now he takes some time to respond. And today, after a month, he asked his attendant to call me and took my name. That is what Anandiji is saying. So the question is, does the speech therapist help to form sentences or to recollect? I don't know, Thomas, if you would have something to share on that. Of course, adding the definitely yes, I would imagine they would do that, but
that's why all these key words, a speech therapist, so that I'm looking at it here, it says, does a speech therapist help to form sentences or also help to recollect? So it's so interesting with the brain, because it isn't like the therapist is necessarily saying, setting up a sentence says, I want to drive. Let's just say, very simple, I want to drive. Well, they're not saying, so don't say, I want to yet drive, or other kinds of ways you can arrange that. They're not going to do that. They just want to say, do you want to drive? That provides that the stimulus, the integration, the feedback, the plasticity, and then express differently than the stimulus in the beginning, which is forming that sentence, but not necessarily with what I want to say, a outside understanding of what the rules of the language would be, meaning, oh, don't do this kind of verb, do this kind of verb, or this tense versus this tense. Yeah, they're not going to try to purposely tell you what the rules are. We know what the rules are. You just have to express those quote rules in all words we know, because the brain has that tremendous capacity, much more than we have any idea, just by listening, because that is the stimulus that it provides. So yes, they do those things. I think in many cases, even the therapists don't realize that their job is to create that environment and then take from that environment, because then it still has to be integrated too. I don't think they fully realize that that is what they do. They have to set up this environment. From that, they take the information, and yes, they will start to form new sentences and appropriate sentences, and also start to recall and to recollect based on the way the brain is doing, not because you've been told, learn this, remember this. It just happens when put with basically setting up that table and let everybody else see what is there for them to eat.
I want to share here, Anandiji and Dr. Thomas also. One of the first, after the first few sessions, our therapist had given him the sheet which is given to kindergarten children, name the fruits. So it had some household articles like a toothbrush, a towel, a soap, what is found in the bathroom or around your house. And he had to just name those articles. Okay, that was the first exercise. And the next week when we went back, he said, now you make a sentence with each of this. Okay, this is a toothbrush. It could be as simple as, yes, this is a toothpaste. This is my favorite, or my brush, my toothbrush is blue in color. As simple. Make a simple sentence with that. That is how we started. And then he told me as a homework, like you will be identifying objects in your house and making a sentence with that. So recollection was there of the articles. He had to go back and recollection was there, and sentence making was also there. So that is how the therapy started for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, basically, yes, exactly. Exactly. Another component of that, and I'll really end up just giving you these words, problem solving has its own power. And that's a lot of what they do with even with you. That becomes a problem to be solved. Here are a bunch of articles, a bunch of items, make something out of that. That becomes a problem solving device that the brain has. It wants to, it doesn't want to eat the soap. It wants to eat the banana and wash with the soap, but that is a problem solving engine. And then again, that's the environment that the therapist is doing. So all of these are, I know they're individual words because it's so, each one has to be unpacked, but problem solving is another component, again, as we just said, with everything from habit to all these other words that I've been writing down and circling them, because that is all of it together. That's how we get better. Yeah. And time.
Yes. Very important.
One quick question which I want. Do you have any WhatsApp group or something where we can speak or talk about something when we want to?
We could in fact share our daily practices as well there. So that,
Are you talking to me? No, somebody else.
No, in the group in general.
Anybody in the group.
Do they have a support?
I'm asking Mr. Sodhi.
See, as far as we are concerned, we do have groups both on WhatsApp as well as Telegram. I'm not sure whether I sent you the link.
Can you send it to one for apps on the WhatsApp, please?
Yeah, see, I can send it to you. However, that's a mixed group. I mean, essentially for stroke affected families. Besides that, we do try to have, and Shruti has been a great help with that, on aphasia sessions, specific classes of aphasia we have had in the past, and we are again hoping to start them again soon, which happen on a weekly basis.
Please keep us in.
But it's just a thought while we are speaking about it, and this is something that at least Shruti and myself have discussed off and on, and Rekhaji also perhaps. In case we find, sufficient people, maybe let's say 5 people or 6 people who can attend, let's say every day,
That would be very nice.
for a half an hour.
Yes.
More than, willing to set it up.
Why not? At least for the reading, or one day we can take up reading activity, one day
Yes.
something like that, whatever. At least share our daily practices. So.
That can be done. I don't see any problem in that. It's a question of, from my side, yes, fixing it up, but from everyone else's side, coming there and participating. That's what I request everyone.
Please let us know. We are open to participating.
Yes.
Oh, nice. Anuragji's mom.
Yeah. Great to see her. Yes. And I would also say, this is while we are there, certainly it will help to have the affected join in it. That I think in some of we did talk about that itself is a therapy. When you see others in the same as you, that itself is a therapy to my mind. So again, I encourage, please bring, you're a caregiver, but do bring, I know that, for example, Shruti's husband joins in very frequently, on our various sessions. Rekhaji's husband has also joined, very frequently. So that itself is, of course, everyone has constraints of time also, but if you can, do join it. Shruti, you?
Yes, we are open to joining all your sessions. So keep us in the loop.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
I see that, Shruti.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. The biggest takeaway for me, I think for everyone else also, is to maintain a diary. Hopefully, we will start soon. I have maintained the diary of progress and all the activities we have done in the past 4 years, and whatever the progress has been made. Yes, definitely. I think my husband will love the idea of taking pictures. So definitely he will come out with a lot of pictures for me to help him convert it into speech. Thanks a lot for that. I request one more thing from your side. This is about the 10 principles of neuroplasticity. I just saw a brief article, and I'm sure you have a very good article with you. Please share it with Hardeep ji. He will share it in the forum, and it will help everyone. In fact, it will help everyone in the group. Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful session.
I will just in the chat, I'm seeing some new faces, the way to add or come to a group. Anyone interested? Akaji is there, and I'm seeing that is the link that you can click to how to add to our groups. We have on WhatsApp, Telegram. I personally prefer Telegram right now. WhatsApp.
What is it?
City. Can come on Telegram, that will be better.
I think I am more into WhatsApp, I guess.
I understand. Telegram is a little bit better for from the purpose of control. That's it. But whatever you're comfortable with, it is mentioned over there, and all to join in.
My WhatsApp number was sent to you in the thing that I wrote down my name, etc.
I will check that. I'll get back to you on that, Sridhar.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Once again.
Thank you, Doctor. It is good to speak to you again. Okay? You have a good week.
We will keep you posted about. We'll keep you posted about our progress. Definitely, we will stay in touch.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are well past almost close to 2 hours now. So thank you very much, everyone. And thanks, Thomas. Tom, it was great having you.
Thank you. Great to see you too.
And
small world, huh?
Small world gets smaller. And
all the time.
Yes, it's smaller all the time. Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you in India one of these days. Who knows?
When you like that.
Yes. So thanks, everyone. And thank you for your efforts, Tom. I'm going to close the meeting and look forward to catching up again with everyone.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.